Most men believe attraction is about saying something impressive, something clever, something that makes a woman laugh or immediately grabs her attention. But what if the opposite is actually true? What if the men who create the strongest attraction are not the ones trying to impress women at all, but the ones who simply choose their words differently? Because there are three words older men tend to use in conversation that quietly trigger attraction in a woman's mind. Words that signal confidence, emotional awareness, and clarity. And here's the strange part: most younger men never use them, not because the words are complicated, but because they don't yet understand how female psychology actually works. Stay with me until the end because the third word is the one almost no man realizes is powerful. Yet, when a woman hears it used naturally in conversation, it instantly changes the emotional tone of the interaction. Now, before we get into those three words, there's something important you need to understand. Women don't respond to words the same way men do. Men tend to focus on the literal meaning of a sentence. Women focus on the emotional signal behind the sentence, your tone, your intention, your presence. All of these things communicate information far more powerful than the words themselves. That's why two men can say the exact same sentence, but create completely different reactions. One man sounds uncertain, the other sounds grounded. Why older men attract women. One feels like he's trying too hard, the other feels completely natural. And women notice that difference immediately. This is why older men often have an advantage when it comes to attraction, not because they are necessarily more attractive, but because they communicate with a different mindset. They aren't trying to perform. They aren't trying to prove themselves. They're simply expressing what they think and feel without hesitation. And that kind of communication carries weight. Now let's talk about the first word. The first word older men tend to use naturally is the word want. At first glance, it seems incredibly simple, but psychologically, it sends a powerful signal. Because when a man clearly expresses what he wants, he communicates something most men avoid. He communicates intention. Think about how many men speak when they're interested in a woman. They soften everything they say. They say things like, maybe we could hang out sometime if you want. Or, I don't know. What do you feel like doing? These sentences sound polite, but they also communicate hesitation. And hesitation weakens attraction. Now compare that with something slightly different. I want to take you out for coffee this weekend. Same idea, but the emotional signal is completely different. One sentence asks for permission. The other expresses direction, and direction is attractive. Not because women want someone controlling their decisions, but because confidence and calm energy. Clarity signals confidence. When a man calmly expresses what he wants, it shows he's comfortable with his intentions. And emotional comfort is attractive. Now, here's something interesting. Using the word want is not about being aggressive, it's about being honest. Aggression pushes, honesty simply expresses. And when honesty appears in conversation, the interaction begins to feel more genuine, more relaxed, more real. Now let's move to the second word. The second word is because. This might seem like a small word, but it changes the emotional depth of what you say. Because when you explain the reason behind your attention, the conversation becomes personal. For example, imagine telling a woman, I enjoy talking to you. It's a nice statement, but it's also vague. Now add one small word. I enjoy talking to you because you notice things other people miss. Suddenly the sentence feels different. Now it carries meaning. Now it shows you are paying attention. And attention is powerful. When a woman realizes a man is noticing small details about her personality, something shifts emotionally because most interactions are very surface level. Compliments about appearance, small talk about everyday topics. But when someone recognizes something deeper about you, it creates connection. And connection is the foundation of attraction. Older men tend to do this naturally because they aren't rushing the first powerful word conversations. They observe, they listen, they notice things, and when they speak, Their words reflect that attention. That small difference creates emotional impact because instead of generic compliments, the conversation becomes specific and specificity feels real. Now, here's where things become even more interesting. When a woman feels that a man is paying genuine attention to her personality, her behavior often changes slightly. She becomes more open, more engaged, more curious about the conversation, and curiosity is where attraction often begins. Because attraction is rarely instant, it grows through small emotional moments during interaction, moments where someone feels seen, understood, or appreciated. And that brings us to the third word, the word most men overlook, the word that older men tend to use without even realizing how powerful it is. The word is appreciate. Now, appreciation is different from a compliment. A compliment focuses on something obvious, appearance, style, surface traits. But appreciation recognizes something deeper. For example, instead of saying, "You're beautiful," an older man might say, "I appreciate how thoughtful you are." Notice the difference. One statement focuses on looks, the other recognizes character. And recognition is incredibly powerful because most people rarely feel truly seen. When someone acknowledges something meaningful about you, it creates emotional connection. And emotional connection is what allows attraction to grow naturally. Now, the second powerful word, there's one mistake that can completely destroy the impact of these three words. And many men make this mistake without realizing it. The mistake is incongruence. Incongruence happens when your words communicate confidence, but your body language communicates insecurity. For example, imagine saying, "I want to see you again," while looking at the floor and speaking nervously. The sentence sounds confident, but your body language sends a completely different message, and the brain notices that mismatch instantly. Human beings are extremely sensitive to emotional signals. Tone of voice, eye contact, posture, all of these elements communicate information beyond words, which is why calm confidence matters more than the words themselves. Confidence doesn't mean speaking loudly. Confidence means being comfortable with yourself, comfortable with your intentions, comfortable expressing what you think and feel. When a man communicates with that kind of presence, conversations feel different. They feel relaxed, authentic, engaging, and that environment is where attraction grows. So remember the three words: want, because, appreciate. The first word communicates intention. The second communicates attention. The third communicates recognition. When those three elements appear naturally in conversation, something interesting happens. The interaction begins to feel more genuine, more meaningful, more memorable. And that is exactly why certain men seem to attract women without trying too hard. Not because they say more than anyone else, but because the words they choose actually mean something. Now, here's something interesting that most men never realize. These three words don't work because the third powerful word, they are special. They work because of what they communicate beneath the surface. Because when a woman hears a man speak, her brain isn't only processing the literal meaning of the sentence, it's scanning for signals, signals that answer silent questions. Does this man know who he is? Is he comfortable expressing what he feels? Is he paying attention to me? Or is he just saying something he says to everyone? Women are extremely sensitive to these emotional signals. In fact, psychologists often explain that attraction for women is deeply connected to emotional perception. It's not just what you say, it's how your words make her feel. This is exactly why older men often have an advantage, not because they know more lines, but because they are usually more comfortable with themselves. They don't rush conversations. They don't feel the need to prove anything. And that relaxed presence changes the emotional atmosphere of the interaction. Imagine two different conversations. In the first one, a man is trying very hard to impress. He's talking fast, making jokes, trying to keep the conversation exciting, but there's tension in his voice. You can feel that he's trying to create attraction. Now imagine a different man. He's calm, he listens more than he speaks. When he does speak, his words feel intentional. He isn't trying to impress, he's simply expressing what he notices. Which one feels more grounded? Which one feels more authentic? Most of the time, it's the second man. And authenticity is incredibly attractive because authenticity creates trust. When a woman feels that a man is comfortable with himself, she begins to relax emotionally. And when people relax, they open up. They reveal more about why these words create attraction themselves. They become curious. And curiosity is one of the strongest emotional triggers of attraction. Now, here's something that might surprise you. Attraction often grows in the quiet moments of a conversation. Not during the loud or impressive moments, but during the moments where someone feels genuinely understood. Think about the last time you had a conversation where you felt someone was really listening to you, not waiting for their turn to speak, not trying to steer the conversation, but actually listening. That experience feels rare, and that rarity creates emotional impact. Older men tend to understand this naturally. They don't rush to fill silence. They allow conversations to breathe. And when they speak, their words often reflect what they observed. That's why appreciation works so well, because appreciation shows that you are noticing something meaningful about the other person, not just what they look like, but who they are. Now, there's another interesting layer to this. The human brain remembers emotional experiences more strongly than logical ones. This means people rarely remember the exact words someone said, but they remember how those words made them feel. If a conversation makes someone feel relaxed, understood, and appreciated, that emotional memory stays. This is why simple phrases can create lasting impressions, not because they are clever, but because they create a certain emotional experience. And emotional experiences are what people remember. Now, there's something else older men tend to do differently. They don't treat attraction like the psychology behind it performance. Many younger men approach conversations as if they need to prove themselves. They try to appear impressive, successful, confident. But real confidence rarely looks like performance. Real confidence looks relaxed. It looks like someone who is comfortable expressing themselves without overthinking every word. And when someone communicates from that place, their words naturally carry more weight because those words are aligned with their presence. Psychologists call this congruence. Congruence simply means that your words, tone, and body language all communicate the same message. When someone is congruent, communication feels natural. Nothing feels forced, nothing feels rehearsed, and people instinctively trust that kind of communication. But when someone says confident things while their body language shows hesitation, the brain notices the mismatch immediately. This is why authenticity matters more than technique. You can memorize the perfect phrases, but if they don't match your natural presence, they won't have the same effect. The goal isn't to repeat certain words. The goal is to communicate honestly. Those three words simply help express that honesty more clearly. Want because appreciate. Each one reveals something important. The first word shows intention. The second shows attention. The third shows recognition. When these three elements appear naturally in conversation, the interaction begins to feel different. Final advice for men: more genuine, more comfortable, more engaging. And when conversations feel that way, people naturally want more of them. That's the real secret behind attraction. It isn't about impressing someone, it's about creating an emotional experience that feels authentic. Because authenticity is rare, and rare things always stand out. This is why certain men seem to attract attention without trying very hard, not because they say more than anyone else, but because the words they choose carry meaning. And when words carry meaning, they leave an impression that lasts long after the conversation ends.